The Drethari Empire believed humans were weak. They thought Earth was too far, too small, and too soft to matter. One quiet morning, they sent a dark warship to a peaceful human research station near the edge of space. It was a calm place, full of engineers and scientists. These people were not soldiers. They were thinkers, builders, and dreamers, studying the stars and sending their knowledge back home. Without warning, the Drethari ship attacked. It didn't speak. It didn't ask questions. 10 humans were taken, dragged away from their work and their lives. The Drethari left no explanation, no message, and no mercy. They erased the data, damaged the systems, and made it seem as if the station had never existed. When the news reached Earth, it caused shock and heartbreak. Families waited for messages that never came. They searched for answers but found only silence. At first, the galaxy paid little attention. Many believed it was just another forgotten border dispute. But those 10 humans mattered. They had names, they had people who loved them, and most importantly, they had a home that would not let their loss be ignored. The Drethari believed no one would notice, but Earth had seen everything, and Earth never forgets. The 10 humans who were taken by the Drethari were not just workers in space. They were real people with lives, families, and dreams. Each of them had someone waiting for them back home. They were more than engineers. They were loved. They were needed. They were important to people who mattered. One of them was a young woman named Mia. She had long black hair, bright eyes, and a calm smile. She was the daughter of a well-known scientist who helped design some of Earth's strongest ships. Mia loved her work. She often sent her father pictures of the stars and funny messages about life on the station. They talked every week, sharing stories and ideas. Her father was proud of her, and he told everyone that she would one day help lead Earth's space program. When she was taken, her father did not speak for 3 days. He sat in his office, staring at her last message, unable to believe she was gone. Another taken human was Jacob, a cheerful man who loved music and jokes. He was the husband of a military commander who served on a defense base on Mars. Jacob had once been in the military too, but he chose to work as an engineer to help others. His wife, Commander Hale, was strong and smart, known for her bravery. She had led missions during dark times and had saved many lives. When she heard what happened, she didn't cry. She didn't yell. She simply stood up, looked at the stars, and whispered Jacob's name. She knew he was not just a victim. He was her heart. And now her heart had been stolen. Lena was also among the 10. She was a soft-spoken woman who grew up on a farm. She had never dreamed of going to space until her younger brother, Theo, started building little rockets out of paper and glue. He looked up to her and begged her to follow her dreams. So she did. She studied hard, joined the space program, and earned her place on the research team. Theo followed her journey closely, writing her letters and drawing pictures of her floating in zero gravity. After she was taken, Theo taped her last letter to his bedroom wall. He read it every night and made a silent promise. He would not let the galaxy forget her. There was also Raj, a quiet man with a kind heart. He had no parents left, but he had many friends who called him their brother. He was close to a famous space architect who designed cities on Jupiter's moons. The architect, named Arjun, had helped build homes in dangerous places where no one else could live. Raj helped him test systems and find better ways to survive in space. Arjun said Raj was more than a helper. He was a part of the dream. When Raj disappeared, Arjun canceled all his projects. He walked away from his work and began searching for answers. Raj had given his best to help others. Now it was time to do the same for him. Another engineer was named Sylvia. She loved old books, plants, and painting. On the station, she had a tiny garden with green sprouts growing in glass jars. Her wife, Eliza, was a top medical doctor at Earth's largest hospital. They used to talk every morning before work, laughing about the plants and planning their next vacation. When Sylvia went missing, Eliza stopped laughing. She looked for news, searched the stars, and made calls to everyone she knew. She wasn't just a doctor anymore. She was a wife looking for the love of her life. Dylan, another of the 10, had a mother who was an important leader in Earth's Energy Council. He used to send her energy reports from the station and ask how he could make things better. They were a team, even from far away. Dylan believed in clean power, safe technology, and helping planets grow. When he was taken, his mother stopped attending meetings. Instead, she worked day and night, reading files, watching the last footage, and preparing a response. She had lost her only son. But she had not lost her voice. Another human was named Emily. She had a brother who was a skilled hacker. He didn't work for the government, but he knew how to break codes and find things that others tried to hide. When Emily disappeared, her brother, Leo, turned on every screen, tapped every key, and searched through the digital shadows of space. He found secret signals, missing reports, and quiet messages that others had missed. Emily once helped him when he was lost in life. Now he was doing the same for her, by finding the truth no one wanted to tell. Juno was the oldest of the group. He had once been a teacher on Earth. After retiring, he joined the space program to help guide younger workers. People called him the station father because he gave advice, shared food, and always had a kind word. He had 2 daughters and a son, all grown. His children were spread across the solar system. One was a mayor on a colony, another led a school, and the third worked in the Space Navy. When they heard their father was gone, they didn't stay silent. They each took a part in the effort to respond. Juno had raised them to be strong and good. Now they would carry his memory into the stars. Talia, one of the other 10, was the cousin of a space miner who worked on Saturn's rings. She loved stars, rocks, and everything quiet. She often sent her cousins samples and stories from the station. They planned to write a book together one day. After the attack, her cousin stopped mining and started writing the story they had planned. But this time, it was about what had been taken. Last among the 10 was Marcus, a joyful man who built music machines. He had a twin brother named Max, who worked in Earth's Cultural Arts Department. Marcus used to send sound recordings from space, funny songs, strange space echoes, and peaceful notes that helped others sleep. When Marcus was taken, Max collected every one of those sounds and played them on every radio across Earth. He made sure the world could still hear his brother's voice. Each of the 10 had someone who loved them deeply. They were not famous soldiers or powerful fighters, but they were stars in the lives of others. They gave, they worked, and they dreamed. The Dreadnoughts didn't just take engineers, they took light from people who needed it. The pain that followed was not small, it spread like fire. Friends felt it, families felt it, teachers, classmates, and neighbors felt it. Even strangers who had never met the 10 felt the weight of their loss. They were more than names on a list. They were parts of a larger story. Each one mattered. Each one left a space no one else could fill. Across Earth, people began to remember not only who the 10 were but what they stood for. Videos of Mia's star lessons played in classrooms. Jacob's jokes were shared in military bases. Lena's childhood rocket drawings were shown in museums. Raj's quiet smiles became symbols of unity. Sylvia's garden photos were posted across social media with green hearts. Dylan's energy designs were printed and taught. Emily's reports helped train new tech leaders. Juno's voice was used to inspire young space students. Talia's stories were read to kids at night. Marcus's songs were sung by school choirs during morning sessions. They became more than victims. They became symbols of Earth's spirit. And through all this pain, one thing became very clear. The Drethari had not just hurt 10 people. They had hurt Earth's heart. They had touched the lives of scientists, doctors, builders, artists, teachers, leaders, and children. The loss was deep, but the love was deeper. The world united in grief, but also in strength. The Drethari thought Earth would forget. But Earth remembered. And Earth was about to answer. After the 10 humans were taken, something changed. It was not loud or fast. It was quiet, like the first drop of rain before a storm. Earth did not send warships right away. No one made speeches or shouted at the sky. Instead, things started happening, small things, strange things. And at first, no one even knew it was Earth. The first sign came from deep space. A Drethari scout ship was moving through a quiet path far from the center of power. The ship was small but full of cameras, scanners, and tools. It watched space, looked for movement, and sent messages back to the Drethari High Command. But one day the messages stopped. The ship disappeared. No sign, no noise, no smoke. One moment it was there. The next it was gone. The Drethari thought it was a machine error. They said maybe the ship broke. But then another ship vanished. And then another. Each one was alone, each one silent. They were not attacked. They were not destroyed. They were just gone. Next, a supply station stopped working. It was a big floating center used by the Drethari to refuel ships and send out food and equipment. It had over 200 workers. One day, without warning, the power went off. Doors wouldn't open. Lights stayed dark. Messages could not be sent. When help arrived a week later, the station was empty. No bodies, no signs of fighting, just silence. The systems were turned off, but nothing was broken. The workers were gone, and no one knew where. Other small things started happening. Data signals were scrambled, maps changed, ships went off course. Drethari officers got messages that were wrong. Sometimes alarms went off when there was no danger. Sometimes systems said everything was fine when a whole section was missing. They blamed hackers. They blamed machines. But they never blamed humans. Not yet. The Drethari thought humans were still weak. They thought Earth was crying, not planning. They laughed in their strong buildings and polished halls. They believed they had shown the galaxy who was in control. They didn't know that control was already slipping from their hands. Meanwhile, people on Earth had not forgotten. The families of the 10 were busy. Some worked in science. Some worked in defense. Some worked in technology. Others were just regular people who had lost someone they loved. But they all wanted justice. Not loud revenge. Not chaos. Just justice. They met in quiet places, in hidden rooms, in places deep under the ground or high in orbit. No cameras, no news, only plans. They did not start with weapons. They started with knowledge. Hackers like Leo, Emily's brother, began working with experts from Earth's top technology centers. They studied Drethari signals, maps, and codes. They looked for weak spots. They found old programs no one had used in years. They slipped into empty systems. They moved like shadows. Engineers who had trained with people like Raj and Dylan joined together. They shared ideas, tools, and systems. They created small machines that could fly without being seen. These machines listened, recorded, and returned. They sent pictures. They brought back sounds. They learned how Drethari stations worked and how to stop them. The children of Juno, the teacher, used their own skills. One contacted old students who now led space patrols. Another gathered scientists from across the colonies. The third worked with Earth's Space Navy to protect hidden missions. They didn't call it an attack. They called it the quiet path, a path toward balance. Commander Hale, Jacob's wife, used her position to move troops quietly. She changed routes, shifted cargo, and sent secret codes to people she trusted. She didn't tell anyone what she was doing. She didn't need to. Those who knew her could see it in her eyes. She was not leading a war. She was building a message. Soon, other strange things began to happen in Drethari space. In one sector, a mining base shut down. The miners said the air systems had failed, but when checked, the systems were fine. The air was still clean. The machines were still working, yet no one stayed. The workers said they felt watched. They said the machines spoke strange words. They left without finishing their jobs. In another part of space, a message appeared on a Drethari station's main screen. It had no sender. It was just a black screen with 10 small white stars. No words, just stars. Then the power went off for 10 full minutes. When it came back, everything was in the wrong place. Files were missing. Records were changed. And again, no one knew how it had happened. The Drethari leaders were confused. They asked their scientists for answers. The scientists said the machines were not broken. The signals were not hacked in normal ways. It was something new, something they didn't understand. Still, the leaders refused to worry. They said, "It's nothing, just noise." But it wasn't just noise. The humans were speaking, not with words but with actions. They were not trying to fight a big war. They were trying to make the Drethari feel what they had caused: confusion, fear, loss. Back on Earth, the people stayed silent. The media had no reports. The governments made no statements. But in secret rooms, small teams nodded as the plans worked. They did not cheer. They did not smile. They simply checked the next steps. Across the stars, allies who had been afraid of the Drethari began to notice. Some of them whispered, "Did Earth do that?" Others said, "No, it's too quiet." But all of them knew one thing: something had changed. The Drethari were no longer laughing. Then came the day when a Drethari fleet ship, a large and powerful cruiser, returned from a patrol with no memory of where it had been. The crew was unharmed, but their minds were blank. They remembered leaving, then nothing. The ship's log was erased. Its systems were clean, as if someone had wiped everything but left the ship whole. The leaders were stunned. They had no answers. They asked, "Who has the power to do this?" A small voice inside one of the meeting rooms whispered, "Earth." The leader slammed his fist and shouted, "Earth is weak." But deep inside, he was no longer sure. The first small revenge had begun. It had no name. It had no face. It moved like wind through cracks. It didn't shout. It didn't boast. It only whispered a warning. "You took our people. We are still here. You will not forget us. You will feel what you gave. This is only the beginning." More stations went dark. More ships turned the wrong way. Supplies vanished. Orders were changed. The Dreadnoughts workers began to speak in fear. They said things like, "The systems are watching us and we are not alone." The Dreadnoughts Empire had always believed it was the strongest in the galaxy. Their ships were large. Their weapons were powerful. Their leaders were feared. They had conquered many worlds and crushed anyone who resisted. So when small problems began to happen, they did not pay much attention. At first, they thought the missing ships and broken stations were just accidents. They believed machines had failed, or that pirates had caused trouble. They told themselves Earth was too small and too weak to be a threat. But as time went on, more strange things happened. A Dreadnoughts general named Varnax was the first to see the pattern. He was old and careful. He had been in many battles. He studied maps and reports every day. He looked at every ship that vanished and every station that stopped working. He noticed that the locations were not random. They formed a shape. It was like a ring slowly closing around the heart of the Dreadnoughts Empire. At first, Varnax kept his thoughts quiet. He didn't want others to laugh at him. But inside, he felt something he had not felt in many years: fear. Varnax brought his findings to the High Council, the group of top leaders. He stood before them and pointed at the star map. He showed how each missing ship and silent station fit into a clear path. He explained that someone was watching the Dreadnoughts very closely, learning how they moved, how they lived, and how they worked. The council listened, but they didn't all believe him. Some thought it was just a trick of the mind. Others said, "Even if it's true, it cannot be Earth. Humans are not that clever." But Varnax shook his head. He told them Earth had changed. He said, "They are not sending warships. They are sending silence. That is more dangerous." Some of the younger council members laughed. They had never seen a real war. They had never faced a loss. To them, Earth was just a small blue planet full of weak creatures who talked too much. But Varnax had fought humans before. He remembered the way they held on when others gave up. He remembered how they built tools from nothing, how they learned fast, and how they protected each other with everything they had. He remembered the fire in their eyes. Even so, the council decided not to act. They said there was no proof. They said the empire must look strong. They ordered their workers to fix the broken systems and replace the lost ships. They wanted the galaxy to see a strong face, even if cracks were starting to grow behind it. But the problems did not stop. A large Dreadnoughts ship arrived at a port to pick up fuel. When the crew turned on the control panels, the screens flashed with human code. It wasn't a message. It was just 10 glowing stars. Then the fuel lines shut down. The lights went out. The ship had to be towed back by smaller vessels. When the technicians opened the engines, they found strange wires inside, wires no Dreadnoughts had ever built. They had no idea how they got there. On a distant planet, a Drethari training base lost contact with headquarters. When scouts arrived, they found all the data systems wiped clean. Not damaged, clean. It was like no one had ever lived there. But food was still on the tables. Beds were still made. It looked like the people had simply stood up and walked away. Some said it felt like a ghost had passed through. Back on the Drethari home world, news began to spread. Workers talked in quiet corners. Pilots whispered in the halls. They asked each other, "What's happening? And why are things going wrong?" But no one had answers. The leaders said nothing. The High Council told them not to worry, but the people could feel it, something was coming. Varnax grew more alarmed. He gathered new reports. He looked at timelines, numbers, and patterns. He found something even more troubling. Every place that had been affected, every ship, base, or system, had a connection to the research station where the 10 humans had been taken. The station's location was the center of the ring. It was the point from which everything else had started. Now Varnax was sure. He went to the council again and said, "This is not random, this is justice." The council grew uneasy. They remembered the humans they had captured. They had called it a warning. They had taken the engineers without a trial, without mercy. Now they began to understand they had made a mistake, a very big mistake. Still, some leaders refused to believe it was humans. They said, "Humans don't have this kind of power." But others stayed quiet. Some looked away. They were not so sure anymore. More reports arrived. On one of the Empire's biggest space stations, security systems failed at the same time. Cameras went black. Doors opened and closed on their own. Ships in the hangar floated away without a pilot. When the systems came back online, a single word appeared on every screen: "Remember." No one knew who had sent it. In another part of space, an entire planet's communication system failed for 5 hours. During that time, every computer played one sound, the last laugh of one of the missing humans taken from an old video. The sound echoed through cities, bases, and ships. People covered their ears, some cried, others stood still. When the sound stopped, all systems returned to normal. But no one forgot. By now, the Drethari Empire was nervous. Shops in space stopped getting supplies. Maps stopped showing safe routes. The cost of simple tools began to rise. Miners could not get the parts they needed. Doctors could not reach their patients. Teachers could not use their computers. Every part of Drethari life was touched. The Empire tried to hide it. They blocked the news. They said, "All is well." But the people did not believe it. They felt it every day. Something was not right. Varnax watched it all. He kept sending messages to the council. He begged them to act. He said, "Talk to Earth. Ask them what they want." But the council was too proud. They had never apologized before. They didn't want to look weak, so they did nothing. But Earth was not waiting. Earth had not sent bombs. It had not sent armies. But it had sent a clear signal. The humans were not afraid. They were not hiding. They were moving slowly, carefully, and with great purpose. Varnax finally did something on his own. He sent a private message to someone on Mars. He had met her once long ago. She was part of Earth's science team. He asked for answers. He said he wanted peace. He said, "We have made a mistake." But no message came back. The silence was louder than any words. On Earth, leaders met in hidden places. They watched the Dreadnoughts fall apart. They tracked every broken system, every lost ship, every message sent in fear. They did not cheer. They did not laugh. They simply watched. Their hearts were still full of pain. The 10 lives taken still weighed heavy on their minds. And slowly, the galaxy began to see the truth. The Dreadnoughts had hurt 10 humans. They had taken them without reason, without justice, and without care. Now Earth was showing them what that meant, not with fire, not with shouting, but with action. The quiet kind. The strong kind. The kind that does not stop. The Dreadnoughts Empire had started to worry. They had once believed they were alone at the top, but now they looked over their shoulders. Now they checked every system twice. Now they asked themselves, what if Earth is still watching? And the answer was yes. Earth was watching. Earth had not forgotten. And Earth was not finished. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, far away from the noise of cities and the lights of space, there was a hidden room where no cameras were allowed. This room had no signs, no windows, and no name. The walls were thick. The floor was cold. The air felt heavy. In this room, the most important people of Earth sat together at a long table. They did not smile. They did not talk about the past. They were there for only one reason: to protect the future. Each person had lost someone. Some had lost family. Some had lost friends. Others had lost hope. But none of them had lost their will to act. This was not a meeting of speeches or papers. No reporters were invited. No news stories were written. No leaders stood on stages. Everything that happened in this room would stay secret. These were the people who made big choices. They were scientists, generals, advisors, and builders. Some came from the moon bases. Others flew in from Mars. A few had traveled from floating stations far above Earth. Each one had something special to offer. Together, they formed a circle of action, not just words. They did not begin with anger. They began with memory. One by one, they placed small photos on the table. Each photo showed one of the 10 who had been taken by the Dreadnoughts. The photos were simple: smiling faces, bright eyes, people full of dreams. For a moment, the room was quiet. Then the work began. The first task was to learn everything possible. They needed to understand what the Dreadnoughts feared, how they moved, and where they were weakest. Teams of experts were called in from every part of Earth's space programs. Hackers who had once broken into systems for fun were now working day and night for justice. Codebreakers from ancient military groups joined forces with young students who had won science contests. All of them worked together, searching for gaps, tracing signals, and following patterns. They created maps full of lines, dots, and glowing shapes. They used satellites, drones, and hidden sensors. They watched, listened, and waited. The next step was building, not weapons that explode, but machines that learn. Earth's builders created small, quiet tools that could move without sound and hide in shadows. These tools could enter Dreadnoughts systems, copy data, and leave without being seen. They were smart, fast, and silent. Some looked like dust. Others flew like insects. A few were no bigger than a coin. Each one was designed with care. Each one had a mission. None of them left a trace behind. Earth also began sending out secret ships. These ships did not fly in groups. They traveled alone, hiding behind moons, inside gas clouds, and under space debris. Their outside shells changed color to match the stars. They had no flags, no names, and no call signs. Inside, the ships carried experts, people trained in silence, speed, and strategy. These people did not carry guns. They carried tools, programs, and instructions. Their job was not to fight, but to observe and prepare. And everywhere they went, they left behind tiny markers, soft reminders that someone was watching. As these silent actions continued, the people on Earth stayed quiet. They knew that the Dreadnoughts were proud. They knew that the Empire would not admit fear, but fear was growing and Earth could feel it. Reports from the Empire showed confusion. Supplies were lost. Stations went dark. Maps were wrong. Nothing worked the way it used to. And Earth had not fired a single shot. This was not by accident. It was part of the plan. Inside the secret room, the leaders of Earth reviewed each step. Every change was measured. Every move was timed. They did not rush. They did not push too far. They wanted to send a message not of war but of strength. They wanted the Dreadnoughts to understand something important. Taking 10 innocent lives had not made Earth weak. It had made Earth ready, ready to act, ready to protect, ready to speak through action, not words. Some leaders in the room had once called for peace only. They had believed that silence would keep the galaxy calm, but now even they understood. The Dreadnoughts had broken something sacred. They had hurt people who brought no harm. They had turned away from truth. Now silence was not enough. Something had to be done, something lasting, something clear. At the same time, Earth reached out to allies in quiet ways. No loud calls were made. No formal deals were signed. But soft signals were sent to other planets and stations. Messages full of quiet facts, soft warnings, and calm truth. Some allies responded. Some offered eyes and ears. A few offered hands. They did not want war either, but they respected Earth's right to defend its people. Together, they formed a web, thin, strong, and almost invisible. The plan also included something deeper. Earth's thinkers and dreamers worked on systems that could break apart Dreadnoughts money and control. They looked at how the Empire moved its goods, how it paid its workers, and how it powered its stations. They found weak points, places where one small change could stop a whole system. Then they built new programs, tools, and signals that could flip those parts off like a light switch. They didn't use them right away. They waited, but they were ready. Meanwhile, the families of the 10 continued to help. They did not cry in public. They did not scream for revenge. They gave their time, their memories, and their strength. Mia's father helped design new drones. Jacob's wife led secret missions. Raj's friend shared old research files. Lena's brother kept sending star maps. Sylvia's wife worked with space doctors to protect field teams. Dylan's mother helped power the hidden bases. Emily's brother tested every new security system. Juno's children built training centers for young agents. Talia's cousin found quiet ways to reach far-off miners. Marcus's twin kept the team's spirit strong with music and calm. Together, they kept the hearts of the mission beating. As Earth's plan moved forward, it did not shout, it did not boast, but it grew. It grew in the sky, in the stars, in the minds of those who refused to forget. The Dreadnoughts had taken something precious. Earth had answered with something stronger. One day, inside the secret room, the final piece was set. A large screen showed every place the Dreadnoughts had touched. Red lights blinked across it. Then another screen lit up beside it. This one showed every place Earth now watched. Green lights glowed like stars in the dark. Slowly, the green began to cover the red, not with force, but with purpose. A soft voice in the room said what everyone was thinking. We are ready. The leaders did not cheer. They did not clap. They simply nodded. Because this was not a moment of pride. It was a moment of promise. The Dreadnoughts had believed Earth was weak, but now Earth had shown what quiet power truly looked like. It was not a shout. It was not a strike. It was the steady hand behind the curtain, guiding the winds of change. The secret plan was not built to destroy. It was built to remind. To remind the galaxy that every life matters. To remind the cruel that actions bring answers. To remind the proud that silence can speak louder than noise. To remind the Dreadnoughts that Earth remembers. And most of all, to remind those 10 lost souls that they were never forgotten. Across the stars, things began to change, not with a bang, not with flashing lights or fire, but with calm, steady steps. Earth did not want to scare the galaxy. Earth did not want war, but Earth did want the truth to be seen and the pain to be answered. The people of Earth had been quiet long enough. Now it was time to act. Their plan was not full of anger. It was full of focus. One by one, outposts in Dreadnoughts space began to fall silent. No battles broke out. No soldiers marched in. Instead, the Dreadnoughts workers arrived to find doors locked, lights dark, and power systems unresponsive. Every machine was off. Every code had changed. When they tried to call for help, there was no signal. It was like the outposts had been erased while standing still, but nothing was broken. That's what confused them most. The machines were still clean. The lights could still shine. But the systems had simply chosen not to work. At first, the Dreadnoughts thought it was just another failure. They tried fixing wires and replacing parts, but nothing worked. A few stations lit up for a few minutes, only to shut down again. Messages came back scrambled or wrong. They could not explain it. Then came a strange twist. In one of the dark outposts, someone found a single word glowing on a screen. Enough. In another outpost, a note had been printed out from an old machine that had not worked in years. It said, "Return what was taken." More messages followed. Some came as numbers hidden inside normal files. Others were shapes drawn into the dust on floors. Some were just 10 dots in a line, always 10, always quiet, always warning. The Dreadnoughts started to notice that nothing was stolen. No food, fuel, or weapons were missing. No one had been hurt. No damage had been done to the buildings. The places looked untouched, but still they were empty, frozen, and cut off from the Empire. Whoever had done it had not come to destroy. They had come to stop. On the edge of Dreadnoughts space, a large shipyard that made small battle cruisers went offline. The workers were ready for a normal day. But when they tried to start the machines, the screens went black. Every engine locked. The lights dimmed. And every camera in the yard showed only one image: the faces of the 10 humans the Empire had taken. One by one, their pictures appeared, each glowing gently as if to say, "Remember us." After that day, none of the ships made there could fly. The tools would not build. The fuel would not burn. The Empire sent experts, but none of them could explain it. The shipyard sat still, as quiet as a mountain, waiting. Then it happened again at a power center near the Dreadnoughts' home world. It was a major hub, one of the most important in the Empire. Without it, many ships could not charge or launch. At dawn, every system ran smoothly. But by noon, everything shut off at once. The workers saw sparks dance across the walls. Music started playing from the speakers, music no Dreadnoughts had ever heard. It was a song from Earth, a peaceful tune played by Marcus, the missing engineer who had once sent songs to space. The music played for 5 full minutes, then silence returned. The Dreadnoughts panicked. Leaders held emergency meetings, but every time they met, more bad news arrived. Another outpost had shut down. Another ship had turned around on its own. Another map had been changed. It was as if someone was holding the threads of the Empire and tugging, just gently enough to make everything unravel. Yet no lives were lost. Not a single Dreadnoughts soldier, worker, or citizen was harmed. This was no war. This was a lesson, one the Empire had never learned before. Commander Hale, the widow of Jacob, helped lead many of the quiet attacks. She had trained her team well. They did not speak to the Dreadnoughts. They did not taunt or threaten. They left soft signs, a symbol, a sound, or a small message. Her team moved through the stars like wind, leaving behind no trace except silence. Other teams joined her. People from the moon bases, from Mars, and even from far-off colonies came together. They used tools, drones, and knowledge. They helped turn the Empire's strength into stillness. They had learned how the Dreadnoughts systems worked. Now they used that knowledge to turn off what could harm them. The Dreadnoughts began to ask questions. Why are they doing this? Why are they not attacking with weapons? What do they want? But no answers came, only more silence, only more outposts going dark, only more systems freezing up. Inside the Empire, fear began to grow. Some Dreadnoughts citizens started whispering to each other. They asked if Earth was behind this. They asked if maybe Earth was stronger than they thought. Some were angry, others were scared. Many just felt confused. They had never seen power used like this. Not to crush, but to pause. Back on Earth, the secret leaders watched the map. Each time an outpost fell quiet, a green light appeared on the screen. The lights began to form a pattern, the shape of a message, a ring around the Empire, not to trap, but to hold. Earth was not trying to take land or rule planets. Earth wanted something else, a simple thing, a true thing. Justice. They wanted the Dreadnoughts to know that every life taken mattered, that every cruel act had a cost, and that Earth would no longer stay silent. More messages began to appear in Dreadnoughts space, not from humans but from machines once used by the Dreadnoughts themselves. One machine printed this: "Peace comes after respect." Another flashed this message: "We do not forget the 10." Yet another drew a picture of 10 stars, each surrounded by a glowing circle of light. Then something happened that made the Empire truly pause. A Dreadnoughts captain opened his ship to begin a patrol. But instead of the usual startup screen, a human voice filled the cabin. It was a soft voice. Gentle, clear, it said, "This ship is watched. It will not harm others. Please return to port." The captain froze. His hands shook. He canceled the mission. The ship did not respond to his commands until he turned it around. Soon more ships began to listen. Some were stopped by invisible signals. Others were slowed by systems that would not open. In every case, no damage was done, but nothing could go forward. And everywhere the same message waited: stop now or lose more. The Dreadnoughts High Council met again. This time there was no laughter. There were no loud voices, only worry. Their strong empire was not falling by fire. It was fading by silence. They had taken 10 humans to prove power. Now they were learning what true power looked like. But Earth did not celebrate. Earth did not boast. They continued their work, carefully, clearly, and always with purpose. They still remembered the faces of the 10. They still heard their voices. They still felt the pain. And they still waited for the Dreadnoughts to make it right. The attacks had no blood. The moves had no flames. But the meaning was loud. You took our people. We have stopped your hands. You may keep your planets. You may keep your pride. But you will return our justice. And you will never forget our strength. The Dreadnoughts were tired of waiting. They were tired of silence, of shadows, of small things going wrong again and again. Their systems had been slowed. Their stations had been shut down. Their ships had been stopped. They still did not know how. They still could not see who. But now the leaders had a plan. They would set a trap. They would bring the humans into the light. They would catch them once and for all. The High Council met in a dark room deep inside their tallest tower. The air was cold and the lights were dim. Around the table sat the most powerful Dreadnoughts leaders. They were no longer laughing. They were angry, quiet, and full of pride. One general spoke with a firm voice. He said the time had come to strike back. The humans had grown bold. They had shut down too many stations. They had blocked too many ships. It was time to trick them. Their trap would look like bait, but it would be guarded. They would make it look weak, but inside would be weapons. They would send a message about a secret ship carrying rare items, moving alone, far from the Empire's core. They believed the humans would try to stop that ship. They believed they could surround it with hidden fleets and catch whoever came. They picked a quiet part of space full of dust and clouds. This place was hard to scan and hard to see into. It would be the perfect trap. The ship would fly slowly like it had no protection. But above and below, behind and ahead, Dreadnoughts warships would wait. Each one was armed with energy weapons and shields. Each one had orders to hold fire until the enemy appeared. They were not just waiting for a fight. They were waiting for proof. The trap was set. The bait ship moved into position. The message was sent. The hidden fleets took their places. Inside the ships, the Dreadnoughts soldiers held their breath. They watched their screens. They waited for something, anything to move. 1 hour passed, then 2, then 5, nothing. Suddenly, one of the ships reported a strange reading, just a flicker like something had moved. But when they looked, there was nothing. A few minutes later, another ship reported the same thing, a quick flash, a faint signal, and then gone. Still, no human ships appeared. But then something very strange began to happen. One of the Dreadnoughts ships positioned below the bait lost power. Its lights dimmed. Its engines went silent. The crew tried to restart systems, but nothing worked. Before they could call for help, their screens filled with a soft white glow. On the glow were 10 shining stars. Then the screens turned off completely. Another ship, this one above the trap, lost control of its steering. It began to drift, even though no force had touched it. The captain shouted orders, but the controls would not listen. The ship turned slowly, pointing away from the fleet. It floated into the clouds and vanished. A third ship reported that all of its maps had changed. The star patterns were upside down. The markers were missing. Their computer told them they were lost, even though they had not moved. The crew grew nervous. They reset the system. Nothing helped. Then all at once, every Dreadnoughts ship in the trap zone saw their lights flicker, just once. A short blink, then black, then on again. The captains called each other. No one knew why. No one had seen anything. Suddenly, the bait ship, the one meant to trick the humans, stopped moving. It did not slow down, it froze. All power gone, its lights out. Its engines dead. The crew inside tried to call out, but their words never left the ship. Then came the silence. One by one, the warships around the trap lost power too. Their weapons turned off. Their engines died. Their doors locked, screens filled with static. No alarms sounded. No attacks were seen, yet everything had stopped. And then in every control room, the same thing happened. The screens came back on, slowly, quietly. On each screen was the same image, the Earth glowing blue floating in black space. Below the Earth was a line of words, written in soft, clear letters. You cannot trap what is already inside. Every Dreadnoughts officer read those words. Some said them out loud, others sat in silence. None of them moved. It was then they realized something terrifying. The humans had never come to the trap. They had already been there, not with ships, not with soldiers, but with code, with data, with tiny machines no Dreadnoughts could see. They had watched the plan being made. They had seen every ship move into place. They had let the trap be built. Then they had taken control. No shots had been fired. No ships had been seen. Yet the entire trap had failed. The Dreadnoughts had tried to outsmart Earth. Instead, Earth had outweighted them. The trapped crews waited for orders, but none came. The High Council back on the homeworld could not reach them. The Empire had been cut out of its own plan. Hours passed. Then slowly the power returned. One light, then another. Systems came back. Ships began to move again, but something had changed. The screens now showed a timer counting down from 10 minutes. The Dreadnoughts feared what would happen when the timer reached 0. They sent messages. They asked for help. They begged the unknown force to speak. When the timer hit 0, nothing exploded. Nothing broke. Instead, every system showed one final message. We could have ended this. We chose not to. Return what was taken. And then the screens went black again. Every ship was free to go. All systems now worked. But the lesson had been given. Earth had walked through their trap without touching anything. Earth had watched. Earth had waited. Earth had chosen mercy. And now the Dreadnoughts were left alone in space, not knowing what would come next.